Imagine stepping into the Palace of Versailles, a masterpiece of gold, crystal, and marble. It's the very symbol of French elegance and royal power. You picture King Louis XIV, the Sun King, gliding through mirrored halls, surrounded by impeccably dressed courtiers. But behind all this glamour, there was a secret, a truly disgusting secret, that filled the air of this magnificent palace. Today, we're pulling back the velvet curtains to reveal the horrifying toilet habits of Versailles. It is a story that's far from glamorous and will make you very grateful for modern plumbing. Let's start with the big question. Where did everyone go to the bathroom? You might think a palace with over 700 rooms, designed to house thousands of people, would have a few decent toilets. Well, you'd be wrong. For the vast majority of the 10,000 nobles, servants, and visitors milling around Versailles on any given day, there were no public restrooms, none. So, what did they do? They improvised. That beautiful manicured garden you see in pictures, it was one giant open-air toilet. Courtiers would simply find a secluded spot behind a hedge or a statue to relieve themselves. The grand hallways, the sweeping staircases, even the cozy corners of elegant salons weren't safe. People would just go wherever they felt the urge. Imagine trying to have a serious political discussion while someone is doing their business right behind a curtain a few feet away. It was a common everyday occurrence. The stench, as you can probably guess, was legendary. Accounts from the time describe an overpowering odor that clung to the entire palace, a mix of sweat, unwashed bodies, and human waste. Now, you might be thinking, what about the king and queen? Surely they had better options. And they did sort of. The highest-ranking royals had access to something called a chaise percée, which is a fancy French term for a commode chair. This was basically an upholstered armchair with a hole in the seat and a chamber pot underneath. A servant, known as the Groom of the Stool, had the rather unpleasant job of bringing the chair, waiting for the monarch to finish, and then carrying away the pot to be emptied. This was actually a highly prestigious position because it granted you private, intimate access to the king. You could whisper secrets, ask for favors, and wield incredible influence, all while the king was on his throne, literally. Receiving guests while on the commode was completely normal for royalty. It was a power move. It showed you were so important, so at ease with your own status, that you could hold court while taking care of nature's business. Ambassadors and nobles would line up for these audiences, trying their best to ignore the situation and focus on state affairs. It's a level of multitasking we just don't see today, and maybe that's a good thing. For the slightly less important nobles, they also used chamber pots, but without the fancy chair. These were often beautifully decorated porcelain pots, little works of art designed to hold the least artistic substance imaginable. Servants would be constantly scurrying through the halls, carrying full pots to be emptied. And where did they empty them? Often, right out the window. If you were taking a stroll below, you had to be on high alert. The phrase, gardes l'eau, which means watch out for the water, was a common warning cry before the contents came raining down. It's the origin of the English word loo. So next time you say you're going to the loo, you're referencing a centuries-old tradition of dodging airborne sewage. So why was Versailles so unsanitary? A big part of the problem was the lack of running water. The incredible fountains in the gardens were a marvel of engineering, but that water was purely for show. It wasn't piped into the palace for sanitation. The concept of flushing toilets existed. Sir John Harington had invented one for Queen Elizabeth, way back in 1596, but the technology just wasn't widely adopted. It was seen as a strange novelty, not a necessity. Bathing was also incredibly rare. Doctors at the time believed that water could open up the pores and let in diseases. So people avoided it. To combat body odor, they relied on heavy perfumes, powders, and wigs. Those giant powdered wigs weren't just a fashion statement. They were also a great way to hide the fact that your hair was greasy, dirty, and probably full of lice. Everyone, from the king down to the kitchen staff, was essentially marinating in their own filth, masked by a cloud of expensive floral scents. This lack of hygiene had serious consequences. disease was rampant. With waste everywhere and a general misunderstanding of how germs worked, Versailles was a breeding ground for illnesses like dysentery, typhoid, and smallpox. Life expectancy was short, and even the royals weren't immune. Several of Louis XIV's own children and grandchildren died from diseases that were likely exacerbated by the unsanitary living conditions. It is a grim reminder that all the gold and finery in the world can't protect you if you're reliving in a cesspool. Eventually, things started to change, but it was a slow process. By the late 18th century, attitudes toward hygiene began to shift. Queen Marie Antoinette, for example, was considered eccentric for her habit of taking regular baths. The French Revolution also played a role. As the monarchy fell, so did many of its strange and unhygienic customs. The 19th century brought the sanitation revolution, with the widespread installation of sewer systems and indoor plumbing. The world and its palaces finally started to smell a whole lot better. Today, when you visit Versailles, you'll find modern, clean restrooms. The halls no longer stink, and you don't have to worry about what might be lurking behind the curtains. But knowing its history adds a completely new layer to the experience. As you walk through the Hall of Mirrors, try to imagine the sights, the sounds, and especially the smells of the 17th century. It gives you a profound appreciation for the simple, invisible systems that keep our own world clean and healthy. The story of Versailles isn't just about kings and queens. It's a powerful lesson in the importance of a good plumber. Thanks for joining us on this rather disgusting journey back in time. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the dirty secrets of history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments what other historical topics you'd like us to uncover. See you next time.